Hey there, it's Andrea. Welcome to the Voice of Influence podcast. Uh, I've been thinking a lot lately, um, kind of going back a little ways in my journey, back to where I wrote my first book, which is called Unfrozen: Stop Holding Back and Release the Real You. And the reason why I've been thinking about this a lot more lately is that I'm currently working on a new book project. I've kind of set it aside for a long time, had this idea, put it aside for a long time, needed to focus on the business, that sort of thing, using the ideas that I had in the business with clients, working it out, trying to figure out how to talk about it. What's the most effective way to talk about certain things that I was wanting to get across? And so I just really set aside the actual writing and development for this opportunity to kind of experiment and try things out and see what works and what doesn't when it comes to communicating this information that I wanted to share. And, we've been doing that on the podcast the last few years too. Uh, And now I'm kind of at that point where it's time. It's time to write this all out. It's time to figure out how to get it out in a more comprehensive form and in a way that's going to really make an impact for our clients and for anybody that would read a book. And so by giving myself permission to start something new, I kind of went back into that place where I remember what it was like when I first started and I felt nervous about putting myself out there. I don't know. Have you ever felt nervous? Do you ever feel nervous about putting yourself out there? Maybe it is by putting yourself out there in a meeting, by having an opinion. Maybe you have an idea that you feel like is a really good idea, and then you kind of start to socialize it. You start to put it out there and you realize that there's somebody asks you a question or they push back a little bit or you get something that maybe makes you question yourself. I don't know that this happens to everybody. I know it happens to me. So if you are like that, trust me, you're in good company. Uh, but but putting yourself out there it can feel like a risk. It can feel difficult. It can feel vulnerable. And the way that I know this is by the way that I react when I do feel those things, because I might not even know that I'm feeling those things. And then all of a sudden I feel irritated. That tends to be what I do when I am not comfortable or I don't like something or I'm or things don't feel quite aligned, they feel off a little bit. That is uncomfortable to me and it makes me feel irritated and I don't like it. I like to resolve tension. I like to solve problems. So when I feel tension, when I feel irritation, I go to that place of wondering, okay, what in the world is going on? Why am I having this reaction? Because I don't like it, number one. But number two, it's probably telling me something. I found over the years that irritation is certainly a vehicle for a message. It's usually telling me something about myself, about my circumstances, about my feelings about my circumstances. Because I'm not always in touch with my feelings. I don't know about you. I am oftentimes in my head and I'm thinking, 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 and I'm not necessarily free and experiencing my emotions and um present with people. And I like to be present with people. I know how to do that. But when I'm in problem solving mode, when I'm in business mode, a lot of times I'm in that thinking zone and I'm not considering how I'm feeling or how I may be considering how other people are feeling, but I may not be as in touch with it. So um that's one of the reasons why I wrote, Unfrozen, because I went to the movie Frozen and became in touch with my feelings in a way that I hadn't been in so long, and so it kind of made me realize how important that is. So when you're trying to put yourself out there and you're feeling this irritation or, um, sadness or fear, oftentimes that's an indication of other things that are going on inside, other f other things that you might be feeling. And sometimes that feeling ends up being sadness or that feeling of vulnerability. Like, "Oh my goodness, I am not just strong and, logical. Like, there is some tension inside of me that's indicating that I'm a human." And that can be really disconcerting when you want to be strong, when you want to come across as strong or smart or, I don't know, capable, like an achiever, a winner. So these feelings of tension, these feelings of irritation, friction inside that isn't friction that's helping you move forward. It's friction that's pulling you back and holding you back. That's the kind of thing that can happen when you're putting yourself out there. So I've waited for like 4 months to watch this movie. It's called American Symphony, and it is about Jon Batiste, who is a recording artist, but so much more. I put him definitely on the level, like, I don't know. I'm not, I have background in music. I care about music a lot, but I don't know everything. I will say that just from my perspective, he is at the level of Lin-Manuel Miranda, who composed Hamilton and so many other things. Um, Jon Batiste is amazing, and he composed the music for the movie Soul, which is a beautiful film by Pixar. He grew up in New Orleans, went to school at Juilliard, and essentially got to this point a couple of years ago where he was nominated for 11 Grammys, the most Grammys anybody was nominated for that year. And he ended up winning 5 of them, including Album of the Year. And so that's kind of who Jon Batiste is. And so they were going to do this documentary about him, and he has been writing what he calls the American Symphony, and it was set to be performed at Carnegie Hall. And so this documentary was supposed to document all that. Well, the day that he found out about the 11 Grammy nominations, he also found out that his partner, his wife, that she had a resurgence of leukemia, which had been in remission for like 10 years. And now here she was, a young 30s woman and dealing with leukemia again and needing a bone marrow transplant. So this documentary ends up not just being about Jon Batiste and his musical genius, but also about their life, their love together, their experience of grief and trauma and difficulty, and how they use art to get through. It's a beautiful, beautiful show. Highly recommend. I want to give you my takeaway though. So the day that he won his Grammys, when he gave one of his speeches, he said, you really can't judge art. There isn't like some pecking order of who's the best, and then like everybody here did beautiful work. There's no list or order of hierarchy with art. He's like, it's human, it's self-expression. These things that I knew, that I grew up wrestling with a lot through the years because I was in a music major. And just that idea of what is best, what am I trying to achieve? And that particular question, I think, is a really fascinating question because In business, of course, we have, key indicators that tell us whether or not we are succeeding. And if we don't have them, we're looking for them. We're like, well, how do we know? How do we measure? And there are so many things that we can measure that are important to measure. And I am all for that. But it's interesting because there's so much of life and business that is about relationships, that is about self-expression. I mean, leadership. Leadership is an art. It is not prescriptive. There is not the perfect way to do anything. Leadership is understanding relationships. It's understanding how to influence people, but also to accept other people's influence, to work together, to bring people together, to collaborate. These are all things that are not linear. They are not formulaic. They are art. What really struck me about this whole movie and this experience, which I give myself fully to movie experiences. If you haven't been around long enough to hear me talk about movies before, that's just something that I have chosen to do. I've chosen to not be a critic of movies. I've chosen to give myself into the experience of movies because they help me get back in touch with what I talked about earlier, out of my head and into and in touch with my heart. Of course, I would encourage anybody to find whatever it is that does that for you and to do that on a regular basis. But my point is that I guess I'm kind of curious. Do you look at yourself? Do you look at other people that you work with as though they are either doing better or worse as a person in their leadership, in the way that they are interacting with people, in their influence as a voice of influence? This tendency to judge and to create some sort of hierarchy or system for grading oneself or grading others, it's such a temptation. But what do we lose when we do that? What do we lose when we're in that mindset all the time? There's like a difference between improving and always looking for how to improve and how to learn and grow. There's a difference between that and grading or checking boxes when we are looking at other people, when we're looking at ourselves, when we're waiting to hear what other people think of us, what kind of feedback they're going to give us, and we feel better or worse based on how we fall, whether it be based on somebody else's feedback or on our own. Some of us are worse judges of ourselves. What if we could separate the things that need to be measured with the things that are human? And this is one of those questions that we have got to wrestle with as we are moving forward into this rapidly changing technology age. With things moving so quickly and technology becoming such a big deal, everybody's asking, what is it that it's really human? One of those things is the way that we relate to each other, the way that we influence, the way that we express ourselves, creativity. So what holds us back then? Let's go back. I'll go back to my book. When I think about what is it that other people expect from me, where do I fall in some pecking order when it comes to being an author or a speaker? When I think in terms of whether or not somebody is judging me or grading me based on those things, I get really wrapped up in checking boxes, in trying to please people, that sort of thing. When I am thinking in terms of continuous growth and improvement, artistic expression as a person who relates to other people, through speaking, through the podcast, through whatever medium, through writing. When I think of that as more of an art, then I realize that, oh, this is more about just bringing who I am to the table and offering it up as a gift. And whether or not people receive or listen or read or whatever, like, I don't need to know why I don't always need to know why. But that's a hard lesson to learn. And the thing that really got me about this movie that I was talking about, Jon Batiste, the thing that really got me about this was that the day after he won 5 Grammys and was nominated for 11, he had also performed at the Grammys. The next day, there were plenty of voices out there saying that he did a great job, but there were also voices out there being critical, that he's too much like Farrell, or that he's this or that, or that, what was he doing on stage? Blah, 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 like just, just critiquing. And even this man that is so genius with his art and what he's trying to achieve with music, even he was bothered by this. Even he can get bothered by those voices. But if he were to let those voices in, there's a couple scenes where he's just laying in bed, just pillow over his head, not wanting to go in to work on this symphony. If he stayed there, if he listened to those voices, let those voices overtake him, and he stayed there, we wouldn't get the art that he is providing, the music that he wants to share. We wouldn't be able to enjoy that. And so he called for help. He called his therapist. He talked to his wife, who's, still dealing with the bone marrow transplant in the hospital, whatever. He's there for her. He's interacting with her. He's remembering that he's a human with a wife too. And that illness and death are so real. And so these things kind of help him remember who he is and what he has to offer. And call him back from holding back. So anyway, this was all fascinating to me, and it really touched me, and it reminded me that if I am going to put myself out there, number one, there are some things that should be measured. Number two, there are some things that should not. There are some feedback that I should listen to, some feedback I shouldn't. This is true for you as well. Not all feedback is correct or should be taken into consideration. You need to know who you are putting yourself at the mercy of their feedback. You need to know how vulnerable you are to criticism and buffer yourself a little bit if you need to buffer yourself a little bit. Open yourself up to the people you trust, to the people that you know are for you, respect you, and believe in you. Those are the 3 things that we're looking for when we talk about the deep impact method. Safe, significant, challenged. You connect with other people by being for them. That makes them feel safe. By respecting them, which allows them to feel significant. And by believing in them, calling them to something more, which is a bit of a challenge. So, who do you trust with those things? Do you and has the person that is giving you feedback, have they earned the right to give you feedback? Or, maybe you're in a situation where somebody really has been hurt by you and they need to be able to let you know, and you need to be able to listen, but it might be difficult. You might have to go through a process of figuring out how much of this really was me. What do I need to change? What do I not need to change? And you might need some help thinking through that and wrestling through those questions. I mean, that's what coaching does. That's what we do in coaching. I mean, you can do that in counseling as well. So when it comes to putting yourself out there, deciding who you're going to receive feedback from, just remember that so much of what you provide as a human being is an art and maybe an experiment that you're going to improve upon. Nothing is perfect. You're not just being graded all the time. We need your ideas. We need your perspective. We need you to be able to listen and hear other people's perspectives as well. We need you to know how to collaborate with other people and learn and grow together. Because we have got a lot of big, complex challenges before us as a global community. And I'm sure that you do in your business as well. So it's time for you to remember who you are as a human being, to put yourself out there, to remember that other people are humans as well. And that maybe not everything needs to be criticized, but maybe everything can be improved upon. Something to think about, something that I care a lot about. I hope that you continue to tune into the Voice of Influence podcast. If you are interested in getting to know us better, want to learn more, come to voiceofinfluence.net. Follow me on LinkedIn, Andrea Joy Winberg. Reach out. Love to hear from you because your voice matters and you can make it matter more.